Go ahead.
It was a beginning, and that's what we were
Step up
waiting
to the mic,
for, to move towards this beginning part of the process. The thing that we've always asked for, and we're still going to ask for, and we need, is targets that we set between the governor and the House and Senate. Those are key numbers that we have for each area. We're going to continue to push for that. I'm hoping there's some openness. Without that, it's difficult to fit the policy issues or take out policy issues. And so that was what the conversation surrounded. I will say we're going to look at a couple of bills tomorrow to start. Higher ed, and what was the other bill? Ag? Higher ed and ag. So it's begun. The negotiations have officially begun.
So you're coming back tomorrow with
Tomorrow at 1 p.m.
three-way?
We're going to keep asking for those three-way targets, and we have to get to that. That's a critical piece, that if we don't do that, just like the governor asked us to have targets between the House and the Senate, it wasn't perfect and easy for the House and Senate to put those together. That's why we need those numbers with the governor. That's the key step that we have to have.
Are you going to proceed one bill at a time, or do you need a global deal? And then
I think ultimately, at some point, we will need a global, joint targets between all of us. That's just kind of the way this works, right? I think what we're going to try to do tomorrow is start with some bills that we think will be a little easier, so we can show some progress and get everybody kind of feeling good about working together and hopefully make some real progress. So that's why we're starting with some bills that look like, when we look at the differences between the House, Senate, and the governor, they look like they'll be a little bit easier to come up with some agreement on. So, but ultimately, we do need joint targets, and hopefully we can get to that agreement quickly. I have been advocating for that all along during the whole session. So I'm hoping we can get there soon, but we're not quite there yet.
Does the governor seem amenable to knocking off a few of the easier bills at the beginning? He wouldn't trade away too much negotiating leverage. You're not hearing that from him.
We're going to at least try, and that's why the speaker said, what are some bills that we're not way apart, and let's start with those and let's get the ball rolling, and we want to do that too. So I'm optimistic.
So what did you do besides agreeing to take up two bills tomorrow?
Well, we also talked about the need for targets. Everybody was in on that conversation about that. I think a number of people think that that's a good idea. That's not that easy to do, to come up with the targets we all agree with, but that is the step that we have to have.
But there's no agreement on how you go about that?
No, but at least we're talking about the importance of it, and that's a good step.
So is that an acknowledgement that every target that you reach with the governor, your spending is likely going to have to go up, and you're likely going to have to go down, unless you're thinking that your spending is your bottom line at this point?
We're going to make progress tomorrow, and I think we're all optimistic about that. I think it's a good opportunity for us to take a couple of bills where we're maybe not so far apart, and if obviously every target affects the other targets, right? So if we spend a little more money in one area, we have to reduce in some other area. At some point, we have to have joint targets across the board. That's really important. So we're working to get to that point.
So is that why you're starting with those two bills, which are some of the smaller bills? Higher ed is a little larger, but means that you don't have to do too much cutting into your tax cuts yet.
Well, in years past, ag has gone right away, and higher ed often goes right away. And so why not take the low-hanging fruit first? I think that's what we're trying to say. The governor's in agreement that we should at least try to do that. Again, we're pushing for the targets, though, because we're going to fight for what we believe in, but so is the governor. In the end, though, if we don't have targets we all agree on, then we can't get to the finish line. And that's why that's such an important step.
Last week, I think you had 3 different bills as low-hanging fruit. Has the fruit started hanging differently?
We had a list of 6 in there, and we let the governor pick the ones he wanted to work on, and that's what we're going to work on first.
So these were the governor's choices?
No, I think the senator suggested that.
Well, I
You
had
suggested the governor
I had
agreed.
6 that I suggested, and these were the 2 that he wanted to take first, and so we're going to take them.
Speaker, is the governor engaged?
Well, we'll see tomorrow at 1 o'clock, right? I mean, really, that's when we'll start negotiating. And I think at some point, we all need to sit around a table, roll up our sleeves, and start working out the differences, right? And the longer we wait for that to happen, the more difficult the job becomes. And the less the public is involved, and the less the rank and file legislators are involved. So I don't like that process personally. I think I've been pretty vocal about that, but I do respect the governor, and he has asked us to do some things, and we have done them. And you know, we have to find budget bills that the governor will sign. That's how this works. He also has to get us to send him bills. He can't pass his own bills. So we have to work together. And Minnesotans elected us all, and I think they're confident we can work together. And I agree with them. I think we can.
Mr. Speaker, did you in the discussions today re-emphasize to the governor how important substantial tax relief is, or didn't that come up?
You know, I wouldn't say that we got into, you know, our differences or visions. I think we can all see each other's visions for how this, the resources that Minnesotans have so graciously provided to us should be spent and should be used. And obviously we have some differences in how those resources should be used. And we will spend some time doing that, but we know where we disagree. I think we ought to spend more time talking about where we agree and building on those areas. And so we didn't have ideological conversations about why we're right and they're wrong, or why they're right and we're wrong. We just don't feel like that's productive at this point. So we're ready to roll up our sleeves, we're ready to get to work, and we're ready to pass a budget that the governor can sign, and Minnesotans will appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, we had a constructive discussion. Started out my pointing out that we have 609 policy provisions in the various budget bills, and I have no intention of going through 609 policy provisions point by point, and if we did, we'd be here for the next 2 months or longer. We didn't resolve how we're dealing that, although I did say specifically on the transportation bill that there are 2 basic sections there on the Met Council and on the CTIP that were not voted on by either the House or Senate. They were just added in the conference report. And I said I won't begin negotiations on a transportation bill unless those sections are removed. And if they don't want to remove them, then they take up to the House or Senate floor, and all the legislators whose district could be affected by that have a chance to weigh in on the proposals, and then they send me a bill, and if it's got those provisions, then I'll be going from there. On the other bills, you know, again, we'll see what kind of progress we can make. If we can clear out the policy and get to the budgets, and I think we can get a resolution in a reasonable amount of time. If they insist on going through 609 policy provisions, we're going to be here for a long time. Add to that?
I'll just add that I think the discussion was very clear today, that we need to start from a common understanding of what the actual numbers are. And also that, you know, Minnesotans sent us here to get this job done and not just to sit in a room where nobody else is and debate. And I think there was good agreement on that. There's a big difference between our positions, but I think there's a common understanding that we actually need to get our work done.
Well, the administration's made it very clear early on in this conference committee process, with letters from the commissioners, some 50-some letters, 190 pages, about where the problems were in the potential conference committees. And frankly, I think the process has gone off the tracks. And where I started to observe it was when they started deliberately adopting policy provisions in the conference committee that the governor objected to. It's like they gave no consideration to the position of the governor and his commissioners. So now they're going to have to be willing to revisit those things, but the governor made it pretty clear he's not going to negotiate money for policy in these budget bills, that the objectionable policy has to come out.
I don't think that Minnesotans would understand or accept if we couldn't agree to a state budget on time because of policy differences. So I think the governor was very clear with raising his concerns about 609 controversial provisions being mixed in with the state budget. And if we can make some progress on talking about the numbers and what a respectable budget would look like for the state, we can move forward. But 609 ideological policy provisions mixed in with the state budget make it very hard to make an agreement unless people are serious about backing off from that much policy in those budget bills.
Governor, did you suggest that the ag and the higher ed bills be taken first, or are you agreeable to that?
I think Senator Gazelka thought we should start with a couple that we have more easily resolved, and we're fine with that. So we agreed we'd start with those. We'll probably agreed we'd start. First of all, tomorrow morning, MMV is going to finish vetting their numbers. So I've said for a couple of weeks that needs to be the next step. We need to know we're talking about the same numbers in terms of not the differences, but based on the same facts and realities. So that's got to be addressed first, and then we can look at the global targets. But the global targets are very much determined by all the other considerations, the amount of the tax bill and the like. But we're going to have that discussion, and I think we'll focus on agriculture and higher education as two of the ones where we think we can. First of all, important, but the number of policy provisions are small. So I think we think that we can hopefully get a resolution there. Although the higher education comes down to spending. How much are we going to spend? And that's where the targets are, everything's intertwined. So I don't know we'll get an agreement, but we can just talk about the parameters.
So you wouldn't say that even if you were to get agreement on the ag bill and the higher ed, that you would be prepared to say, okay, let's let these conference reports go to the floor, get passed, and then you'd sign them? Would that be premature?
I think it's premature. I don't think we're there yet. I think we need to take on a couple of the more problematic bills in terms of the policy. I mentioned the environment one, the jobs, which have, what was the number, Jeff? On the environment and the jobs bill, what are the number of policy provisions?
35 in jobs, 40 in environment.
No, 35 policy provisions in jobs, 40 in the environment, a number of which are very, very controversial. I mean, that'll be the acid test. If we can clear that, one of those or both those away in a reasonable amount of time, then we'll know we're on a track that's got, can be resolved for as Representative Horton said, a timely conclusion. If we get bogged down in one of those, as we got bogged down in 2015, and we're going through every particular and every disagreement, then I will conclude that this is not a practical way of resolving our differences. But we want to give it a try. We want to try to work this all out in the next 2.5 weeks, and that's our responsibilities. And so we'll proceed.
And to be clear, are you saying no policies or a manageable number of policies?
Well, I'm not saying no policies. I'm saying not 609. And let's look at, there's policy in mind. If you've got eliminate pre-K, that's a policy, but it has major financial implications. So those kind of policies, I think, are legit. The ones that are extraneous and the ones, as I say, that haven't even been voted on by either the House or the Senate are from my standpoint, out of bounds.
So you're talking about hundreds that are out of bounds?
Well, hundreds of the 609, yeah, definitely. I haven't counted up the ones that were acceptable. If we want to get this done, we got to have these be budget bills. We got enough differences there we got to work out. If we're going to try to revamp state government according to the way they think it should be revamped, there's an election next year for that. This is about passing a budget we can all live with and is the best possible for Minnesota given our differences.
Governor, the addition of the policy provisions in some of the conference committees that maybe were not heard in the House or the Senate, how do you think Minnesotans should feel about that lack of transparency there, considering that some of those may not have been heard in either bodies?
I think that speaks for itself. I mean, it's really out of bounds of the process that's supposed to go on. That's where, again, if I wanted to take a hard line and just say, all right, pass these bills, the conference reports, just debate on the floor, vote on them, and then send them to me, and the ones I find unacceptable, veto, and they'll start there. I mean, that would have been the hardline approach. I thought we were operating in a spirit of cooperation, and that they were going to acknowledge, the positions that we've taken, and the commissioners, those 190 pages, I vetted those. Those are my positions as well as the commissioners' positions, and they've been largely ignored. by the conference committee. So, you know, if they want to take that route and just stage this major confrontation, then that's what we'll get. If they want to be reasonable and take out things that don't have anything to do with the budget, then, or very little, then we can get it resolved and get it done on a timely basis. And we'll see. My mother always said, actions speak louder than words. The actions of putting 609 policy provisions contradict the express desire to send me bills I was going to sign and have them done in a timely fashion. So thus far the actions haven't measured up to the words, but we'll see if that can change.
Governor, are you any less optimistic that the transportation agreement can be reached in session?
They take the Met Council and the CTIP out. Otherwise, I say, put them on the House and Senate floors and let all the legislators whose districts are going to be seriously affected by those provisions that haven't even voted on them, either the House or Senate. And then we'll see where it stands when it comes, when the final bill comes to me. But, you know, again, I was shocked that they would put in for those kind of major policy provisions, revamping the whole Met Council. It hasn't been debated or discussed on either the House or Senate floor. I mean, that's just way out of bounds of how good government functions in Minnesota.
If those bills, Governor, came back from the House and Senate floors to your desk, then.
Oh, I'm going to look and see what they say. At least they've been vetted by the House and Senate, and we'll see what they say. I can't speak for Senator Barker and Representative Bergman, because I mean, their members have had a lot to say about these provisions and other provisions too that are in these conference reports that, you know, huge amount that they just took from the House positions. The Senate hasn't acted upon, voted upon, considered. I don't know if they passed the Senate. I can't say, but you know, to cut the members out of the process on matters of real significance is just really violates the tenets of the government.
If the bill reached your desk after being passed off of both floors with the Met Council and the CTIP provisions, would it elicit
the way they're written down, yes.
Did you talk about bonding or taxes?
Very, very briefly, we said that we like to have both bills. We don't have to have either bill. Senator Bond pointed out. You know, we'd like to have both, but you know, and again, they certainly impact, especially the tax bill, the targets for everything else. So they were discussing. We didn't get into the details.
You didn't get into a lot of details today. That comes to, of any bills. It comes tomorrow. Is that
we didn't discuss any bills. We spent a great deal of time talking about the dynamics and about not the particulars of 600 policy, but the fact of them and how detrimental that'll be to any timely resolution. We talked very substantively. We didn't get into particulars. We start tomorrow at 1 o'clock here. We got a lot of work ahead of us and 2.5 weeks to do it. So we can clear away the flotsam and focus on what our job is, which is pass budget bills. Then we can, I'm confident, get that resolved in 2.5 weeks.
Are you buoyed in your positions by a question that Carter should be asking by their poll that showed you kind of insanely popular?
Insanely popular.
What was it, 62%? Come on.
I'm very pleased with that, but I don't know what difference that makes in terms of everybody's looking at this from their own district, their own perspective. So I just certainly beats the alternative. Very good. All right.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. And